my name is Desiree Dorion, and I am your host for the CCMA Achimotak Conversation Series in honor and celebration of Indigenous History Month. Achimotak is Swampy Cree for Let's Talk About It Together. Our guest today is a three-time JUNO nominee. He's a finalist in the SiriusXM Top of the Country. His voice is as smooth as your favorite glass of whiskey. He is my good friend, one of my favorite people, Don Amero.
Hey, Des, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, life is constantly throwing curveballs, but they're not all hitting me. So,
That's good. That's good. Duck and dodge. Duck and
yeah,
dodge.
yeah.
So one of the first questions we ask in Indigenous country, and I've been asking everybody this question right off the top, is where are you from?
Born and raised right here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I have Cree and Métis roots on my mama's side, and I have East Coast Acadian European roots on my father's side. So I'm a real mixed bag. I always make this joke. My mom always said that I was Heinz 57 growing up, which is not exactly what I am. But I've always sort of felt a closer connection and kinship with my Indigenous side. And so I've always identified as Métis. That's always been sort of my first, when people ask, what are you? That's often what I say. And I've gotten a
What
lot
are
of,
you?
yeah, yeah. People think I'm Italian with a name like Don Amero, or they think that I'm Filipino.
Pepperoni.
Yeah, yeah. They think I'm Filipino. That's another one that I've gotten quite a bit.
Mm,
But
mhm.
yeah, I've identified as Métis. So that's the long
Okay.
answer to that question.
The very short, long answer. What was it like growing up as an Indigenous person in an urban setting?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the interesting thing. So I kind of grew up, didn't really think anything about my skin color or my race. It was never something, because my parents didn't I didn't grow up with a lot of culture. I grew up with like pretty poor parents. We had enough. Uh, sometimes not.
Hmm.
And it was just about surviving, to be honest. I mean, like I maybe sound like I'm making it dramatic, but I didn't really have a big, strong connection to any culture or any sort of identity at that point in time. It wasn't until I was probably, I want to say, late teens, early 20s, when I really started making this understanding and recognition of my Indigenous roots. And I carry my grandfather's Métis card. That's what I have with me. And for me, I've wrestled with that more as an adult than it was really sort of in the early growing up years.
Mm. So you when you say wrestled with, you mean you've just started as an adult digging into your background and your history and learning more about your ancestors.
Yeah, well, because like we've often all heard about those, the indigenous communities who have felt to be ashamed of who they are, right? And my mom is a product of that, and so,
Yeah.
and in her own family, she would be made fun of, and she could hear them talking about indigenous people in a certain way, and thought,
Mm.
that's not us, that's not us, and then I'll tell you the truth. What it was I was at a Steve Bell concert. Do you know Steve Bell?
Yeah.
Steve Bell's a really great friend of mine. He wasn't at the time when I heard the concert, but he did a song called Red Brother, Red Sister. I was probably about 23 years old, and I had already been dabbling in the music world and stuff, and starting to kind of unpack a little bit of this, who am I kind of stuff. And when I heard this song that he sang, it was a Bruce Cockburn song called Red Brother, Red Sister. I ugly cried. I was in his church, and I ugly cried. Big tears come down my face, and I was just like, I was frozen. Everybody got up to leave after his concert, and I stuck there, and I just was like, man, that was heavy, because there's a lot of big lines in the song, and one of the biggest ones was, like when he says, they used my savior's name to keep you down,
Mm.
and really talks about these atrocities, like really heavy racism that people would have dealt with and do deal with. And I thought, holy smokes, that's a part of me. Like, I just felt like the weight of all that was like, that's part of who I am,
Mhm.
that part of my history. And I was like, I want to change that. I want to change the way people think and talk about Indigenous people. And I want to be, I often say this, I want to be on the front lines of that change, and start becoming I use this phrase a lot because our good buddy Alan Gray Eyes gave it to me. He says, being an amplifier of Indigenous thought and ideas. And I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. And so
Yeah.
that really started me on the path of like uncovering a bit more of that family history, and just really trying to be somebody that could be a light in sometimes a dark place.
Well, when the news broke And when I say the news, I mean the mainstream news, because I think many Indigenous people have known, and in fact, it's written in the Truth and Reconciliation report that many kids at residential schools did not make it home. So that's what I mean when I say when the news broke, is I'm referring to the mainstream media, that the remains of 215 children were located and at the Kamloops Residential School. That set you into motion. It set you into action. You hosted a discussion with Sarah Burke and our friend Alan Grey Eyes and Megan Patrick. You gave a haunting performance of the national anthem with 215 on the Jumbotron. Why did you feel compelled to use your platform in the way that you have?
Well, so I feel like I've always used my platform. Like one thing that we keep saying as a team, having meetings and stuff with the label and my management and stuff, is saying that this is not new for us. This is not a new territory for me. When you say hearing the news of the 215 children, it breaks your heart. You're like, ah, but at the same time, it's like, it doesn't surprise me. Like I listened to the words of some of those that gave testimony of their accounts at residential schools, and brutal stories. The one that sticks with me, and I can share it here. It's one elder. She was talking about a friend of hers who had a baby, and she was just a teenager, and they took the baby and they threw the baby in the furnace. And I heard that story, and I thought, man, how is this our history? So I've been wrestling with this for years, right? This idea of the realities of our history, and I think having 215 young children finding the remains of their bodies opened up the eyes in the same way that my eyes were opened up, in hearing some of those stories, through that whole TRC conversations. And I just feel like the conversation has always been here. I've always been doing it. But what happened in the last week, all of a sudden, a lot more ears perked up and a lot more eyes opened, and so it just gave, I don't even want to say opportunity, because I'm not trying to be an opportunist in all this, but I think at the same time, it's like, okay, people are really listening, so let's make sure we're saying something.
Yeah.
And so here's the funny story. So I was at the cabin last week or 2 weeks ago with my family, and it was during the Jets' first run against Edmonton, and Stacey Nattrass sang the anthem, and somebody said, Don Amero should sing the anthem, like one of the neighbors in the cabins. And I'm buddies with Mark Chipman. I said, hey, somebody just said Don Amero sing the anthem, and he goes, oh, we could make that happen. And so I was like, oh, cool. And I just knew, if it happened, it might happen somewhere down the line. And I've sang the anthem a couple times, so I think that's why people know of me as an anthem guy. So, and then that was kind of a day before I think the news broke, like you say, of these 215 people, 215 kids. And then Mark said, would you like to sing? Here's the scenario. And I said yes. And then about 24 hours later, I said no.
Yeah.
And then about another 24 hours later, we had a long talk, and I said, you know what? The only way that I think this could work, I said, because I thought, like, what if I got up there and I didn't sing? And, what if I got up there and do the collar and Kaepernick thing and take a knee, and all those things. And I thought, no, it just feels like we're just trying to copy something, and it wasn't our thing. And I said, you know what? Like, because I also feel I've sang O Canada, a number of times in my career, and I'm not like anti-Canada. Like, for me, it's like, I'm anti bad things happening to people. That's what I am.
Yeah.
And I felt like, okay, so how do we do this? I said, Mark, let me leave this with me. I want to see if I can give you a version of it that feels like right now. And so it was a crazy long day. We literally, within those 3 days too, we put an offer on a house. We didn't get the house, by the way.
Oh, you didn't?
We didn't get the house, no. But it was just this crazy couple of days. And then I got my family back out to the cabin, because would come home for a couple of days, went back out. I got them there, settled them in. I said, I'm just going to sleep here on the couch. I'll drive back out to back to Winnipeg in the morning. I was going to kind of sneak out in the morning before the kids woke up.
Yeah.
I laid down in bed, and my mind just would not stop. And I was like, you know what? I got to go back home, and I got to try to tackle this anthem, see what I can do. So I got home at like 1:30 in the morning, and I'm like creating something, and I'm going, okay, what do I do? And what you heard is what I created, and I sent it to Mark at 2:30 in the morning. And then I checked my phone at 7:30 that morning, and he had responded saying, this is great, and this is really what I think we need. And and I really credit the Jets, because the Jets have already been doing the reconciliation work. When the TRC, the 94 calls came out, the Jets could hold their head up high because they've already been doing some of those
Right.
recommendations. And I don't know if they've executed everything perfectly, but I just think that they're doing stuff. And I think not a lot
Yeah.
of organizations can say the same thing. So that was the whole leading up to that. And it was like, and since then, it's just been this like tidal wave of like, you know, people just feeling like they had no idea, like it woke them up, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
woke thing, right? People feeling awoke.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just see that as only positive, like the fact that people are at least waking. I wish they had 20 years ago, 50 years ago,
Right.
100 years ago, but it's like here we are now. If you're listening, let's have a conversation.
Yeah, I love that. Can you explain why, I mean, I know why the anthem is controversial, but I think that a lot of the listeners and people watching don't understand why
Mm.
our national anthem is controversial for Indigenous people. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, is the first opening line, "Our home and native land." It just feels like it almost feels like a separation right off the top, right? It feels like our home and native land, and I think that that's often been a bit of a struggle. And I know a lot of indigenous people in this country have said our home on native land, and so that's kind of been a thing. And the other part of it is when you think of the atrocities of residential school, which were run by the churches, and you say, God keep our land, and there's this spirituality element to the anthem that, people feel like, how do we still sing that knowing that it was people here claiming to be the hands of God that were taking the lives of these people? And I feel like that's really hard to kind of feel like, how do we sing that song with with full ambition and full heart? And so what I wanted to do when I sang Anthem was I wanted really people to really listen to every lyric. And I had a number of people say to me now that they never really paid attention to the lyrics of that song, which is strange to me because I'm like, how do you not know what you're singing when it's your national anthem? And my the way that I've sort of juggled with that or kind of come to terms with that is that I don't believe it was Creator that did these things. For me personally, I don't believe that God did these things. I think it was evil people doing evil things, and that's not to say that all the church is all evil. That's for me, I feel like the church leadership and government leadership had led people down a path that felt that, and I can't believe that people ever would have thought that people were worthless,
Yeah.
and just
Well, and that's the whole debate, right? Is that like some people feel that like the church as a whole institution has helped facilitate these atrocities and these horrendous acts. And I was just actually reading a Facebook post today where the someone had commented that if there's nothing to cover up, then let us look. And it's just it's I think that the whole for me, what I take away, just like you were saying that the what can people are listening. For me, what I take away is that I just hope that all of these little babies, these children, these kids that were my kids' age, these kids that were your kids' age, I just hope that their deaths were not in vain, and that we can't change what has happened or has not happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, but we can change what's happening now.
yeah.
And I think that as an outsider, as your friend, as someone who cares about you, I've watched you move through this with grace and with dignity. And I think that I've been really proud of your ability to really inspire togetherness, and you've done that all along. That's not something that you're doing now as you say, as a means to be opportunistic. I was thinking today, actually, when I was thinking about our conversation that we were going to have, and some of the things that I've seen you do over the years. You curate a Spotify playlist and you add a bunch of your friends, and you are chairing this equity and diversity committee with the CCMA, and you invite me in to help facilitate these conversations. You do a Christmas show every year where you bring in your friends and you help amplify different voices and people. And why is that so important to you, to shine a spotlight on Indigenous talent?
Yeah, like it's I feel like I enjoy whatever light that shines on me when I'm not standing there alone. You know, I feel like I can really enjoy it a lot more knowing that there's a community of people around me that get to enjoy it too. You know, I have a feeling like those that would be stranded on an island by themselves in a beautiful beach in the middle of nowhere, you know, beautiful blue water. It's pretty beautiful looking, you know. But if you're by yourself, I watched Castaway, you know, and but if you had a community of people around you, maybe it's not so bad, you know. And I feel like my whole hope has been, right from the beginning. Like I've said this a lot, and you probably heard me say this in exhaustion, Des, throughout the years. But like to be somebody who what I create, I hope will encourage and inspire the people around me listening to do good things for themselves and the world around them. And I think that you can't fake authenticity. You can't fake just being real. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the day, I do my hair. I put on hopefully clean clothes, and you have to present yourself in a certain way. But I also feel like it's all just we have to be able to kind of there's the entertainment world, right? People just want to be entertained
Yeah.
sometimes. But then there's the other part of it. I think I always catch people by surprise in some way with this because it's like, but wait a minute. I know today you sitting there in, row 7, seat B, whatever, you know, I know you went through something today. And I know that, there was a moment today where you just felt like you just wanted to give it all up and lay in bed and just wait till the day ended. And I felt that way too at some point in time. And everybody in this room, it's like the great equalizer, right? That we all sort of are in this mess together. And I think my whole hope is like, how do we all get everybody to the same playing field, which I think is what we're trying to do as a country, which I'd like to think we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then create a space where it's like, you're different than me. Cool. Let's have a conversation. Let's have an opportunity to hear about those differences and celebrate those. That's
How do you like? I've seen some of the comments that people post, and I've seen, like I said, you handle things so gracefully. And in my head, I'm reading like a comment or something, and I'm like ready to like go to war and jump off the porch for you. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous, Don. Like this is so infuriating. How do you keep your cool in some of those moments?
Yeah. So I haven't read them all yet. So maybe I haven't gotten to the ones
Oh,
where I couldn't keep my cool yet. But I've said this, like so somebody reached out to me personally and said, I shared this publicly too, that they said, by the way, I felt really awful when you did this. I wish they had elected not to sing the anthem. And yeah, and I wrote back and I just said, what made you feel awful? Like, and so when I hear these people, like you're gonna have lovers and haters, and I feel relatively I have more lovers than haters, if that in a completely platonic way, and I feel like the people that get me, and those that don't, there's not a lot, and that's okay. Like I think people that are like, for whatever things people say, it's like, well, you at least you told me you didn't feel good, so maybe let's figure out why you didn't feel good, and I could say I didn't feel good either. Like I felt like I was really like I wrestled with it, right? Like I wasn't
yeah.
like this is gonna be so easy, no problem. I'm gonna sing the heck out of this song and sound really good. It's like no, it was like I
There
was
was a
really like
moment when you started the anthem, and your voice is always so strong and so smooth, and it was like I could tell you like you had a quiver just
mm,
at the top of that song, and I thought
mm,
like my heart was pounding for you. I just thought, oh my gosh, Don, like, and just and I was proud. Like I just thought, for I thought it was a beautiful example of generally in you as an Indigenous human being who just so happens to be an artist, of your resilience, and that we're still here, we're still coming to the table, we're still coming to this with an open heart and an open mind, and we just want to be met part way, you know and I was just really really proud of you when you stood
mm.
there, and despite the nerves or the little tiny quiver right at the top, and you just did it. And
Well, it was a funny moment because I know there's a hockey game to be had, and people are there to watch a playoff game, and we kind of we didn't steal a moment, but we were just like, we know we've got people paying attention. So,
Yeah.
you know, and again, because the Jets and how their organization runs and how they on the front lines at reconciliation, it seems to me, they really wanted to make sure they had this ceremony right at the front. And before I went up, and I love playoff hockey, and I love like being in that arena, like when they got the big blaring. You've been to a couple playoffs games, right?
I've been to one. My husband
Okay.
dragged me to one, and I was like, okay. And
But
he actually asked me at one point, "Can you just stop talking, please? Like, we're here to watch hockey."
but it's epic, right? Like it's just so anthemic and like building, and I'm just like, and I'm watching this. I'm like, wait a second, I'm here for a reason. And all I did was I closed my eyes and I sat at the side and I just thought of those 215 kids, and I thought of the residential school survivors. We had Elder Wally and Karen Swain. They were there beside me, and I thought of them. They're residential school survivors too.
Mm,
And I just thought, man, this is a heavy moment, and I could not let that go. And so when I got up to sing the song, I bowed my head and I closed my eyes and I just kind of tuned it all out because I just didn't know what was going to happen around me. And literally it was like, here's the anthem, and then this low note starts, and then as it started, go Jets, go, come on boys, like that. Somebody yells that, clearly
yeah.
not reading the moment. Read the room, pal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, that's fine. Like people are there for a Jets game, and they're excited about that, and they haven't been in one for how long, right? So,
Right.
and so I just kept those kids in my mind, and I thought, like this is really about making sure that it's not in vain. That this uncovering is really about opening up a brand new door for all of Canada, and really how those lives are not gone in vain is that we now do all we can to acknowledge that, and for
Yeah.
every life that we find, because like you say, I think there's going to be a lot more, and yeah, that idea of it not shocking Indigenous people. I feel like
Yeah.
there's a lot of us that were like, and I think some it still did, and it opened up wounds for sure. But I
Yeah.
think for many of us, it was like, here it is.
Yeah.
Here's
It
this.
does it does feel a lot like an awakening. Like my grandmother is a residential school survivor, and she's told me that she believes that there are children at the school that she attended, and I think it's just a matter of time. But I hope that all of the work that people like you are doing, and teachers are doing, and just the everyday heroes that we don't hear about, and that aren't in the spotlight, that are doing this work in the context of the work that they do. I just hope that in the next generation, that our kids are going to be so much better off than our generation is.
Yeah.
I want to.
Sorry, just to that point, like I know when you talk about that, like I know one of the things that people have said to me is that how do we, make sure this isn't just a trend and isn't just a thing. I was like, well, you kind of have to say something now, because if you don't,
Yeah,
you look bad. And I said, but the real rubber is going to meet the road in 6 months from now when people say,
absolutely.
what are you doing, right? Like it's happening right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So I feel like we need to make sure that action items are being having taken place, and like I feel like it's important that this becomes a national, every person. And one of the things I keep saying too is that it's about changing the psyche of every individual. And you can't force that. You can ask government to do things. You can put policies in place but you can't put policies in place for the individual, right? Like you have
Yeah,
to kind of like have people, if they're leaning in, listening, tell them the story.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I want to change gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
You started your music career in the folk scene, but before that, you worked in the carpentry field. Can you tell that story a little bit? Can you talk about that?
Okay, so I worked a lot of different jobs, basically all throughout my young 20s, and I worked as like Perkins Restaurant a couple times. I worked as a security guard at Portage Place Mall. I worked as a dance teacher, believe it or not. You knew that though.
No, I
Right?
didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No,
So,
what kind of dance did you
so I
teach?
taught jazz, breakdance, and hip hop.
Oh, I almost want to ask you to show us a few moves, Don.
I got no more moves left. They retired with me a long time ago. Um, I used to, and sort of my last real job, I often joke, is that I was a hardwood floor installer, and so I was in 2006 I was doing the hardwood flooring job then, and I went to audition for Canadian Idol because they were in town, and
Mm,
I was like, I'll give it a shot, and I went in and eventually got the golden ticket, and went to Toronto, made it through pretty much every round until the final one till they cut down to the top 22, and they sent me home, and I was like, I was just devastated. And
I suck. I'm just
even
terrible.
even depressed. I was like, my wife was kind of worried about me for a while. She's like,
Aw.
"You're just bummed about this?" She's like, she's just like, if you want to do it, go do it. Like, what do you don't need a golden ticket to do follow your dream. And so that's when I recorded my first album. And then a year after having that first album out is when I finally jumped in and started doing this thing full time. Which is kind of crazy because what happened was is I was working at my job and on my hands and knees and nailing in a floor or do something and scraping it. And my boss comes in and goes, "Man, you look terrible." And I was like, "Well, this isn't what I want to do." He goes, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I've been doing this music thing for a while and I'd like to really give it a shot." And I thought he was going to be like, "Well, don't be stupid. That's never going to work out, man." He goes, "Well, what are you waiting for?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. What am I waiting for? See ya." And I quit. I walked off the job. Okay, that's not true. That's not true. I gave him 2
I was
weeks
gonna
notice.
say, was that the truth, Don?
I gave him 2 weeks notice. I was a little more respectful than that, and he's a really good friend actually. And so I gave him 2 weeks, and I left, and I that was around September 15th, 2007, and I've been doing this ever since.
2007. And you started in the folk scene.
Yeah, well, like even if you did a bit of a deeper dive than that, which is probably hard to find because it's not anywhere for public consumption, but I started off in the rock world. So my brother and I had a band called Maine, and then I had a band called Rising. We every group was terrible.
I'm learning new things today.
Well, and then that like the Rising was pretty good. Rising was pretty good. But and then yeah, I started kind of doing my own thing. What happened? Actually, here's what happened. In 2004, I was in Rising, and that morning, Breakfast Television, I think it might have been,
Yeah.
said, "Hey, you want to come on and sing some songs?" And so yes, yeah, sure. I went and sang some songs as Don Amero, not as Rising. The band got together that night and said, they said, my buddy goes, we didn't like what you did this morning. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, you're either this or you're that. Are you going to go out as your own thing? Or you're going to do the band thing? And I was like, well, why can't I do both? Like, I like this, but that's another outlet for me. And they kind of made me have a choice. They said they gave me an ultimatum, like
An ultimatum.
And I was like, well, I have to do me. Like, sorry guys, I'm walking. And I've since done what I've done, and Rising was no more.
So you gave them 2 weeks notice as well.
I gave them
2 weeks notice. 2 weeks notice, Don.
Yeah, that's my next album title.
So what drew you to country music?
Okay, so then I got into the folk and roots community, and which I say kind of like straddles closely to the country world. Like it's very like it's parallel to, I would say, because there's very folksy kind of, and when you say folk music too, it's like it's very different too. Like there's not just that, like there's multiple styles of folk music too.
Yeah.
And so I grew up. My mom and dad were massive country fans. Charlie Pride, and Garth Brooks and Patsy Cline and Reba McEntire and
all the
Alan
good.
Jackson. What Randy Travis was another big one in the home.
Oh yeah.
And so they would play. So my dad was from the East Coast, so he would come. He came here and he brought his guitar out every payday, and him and his buddies would come over, and it was so cool because it was about music and it was about kind of just fun and sometimes a little bit too much fun. But it was about fun and music, and I watched them and I just thought, man, this is so cool to see music this way. And it was very ruckus and loud and fun, which is funny because that's not how people would describe my music at all. But that was my first sort of love of country music, watching them do it. And so I come by it honestly because I saw them in it with it. And then for me, it was kind of like I'd always had my toe in the country world. If you kind of do the deep dive of Don Amero stuff, there's country flavor in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was back in 2015 I put out my album Refined.
Mm-hmm.
And I that with our buddy Murray Pulver. And so that one kind of had a little more country flavor than ever before. I wrote I co-wrote for the first time for that album, and one of the songs with Troy Cokel, who's a fantastic singer-songwriter as well. And we just felt like there's some country stuff in here, and it was literally like a natural evolution. And then in 2015 I put out the album Evolution, which was all country songs. So it was really just again an authentic growth and grassroots thing for me that led me here. And then I walked into the CCMA office in 2017, met Tracy Martin, sang for them, and became friends with them immediately. They were glad that I showed up. and again, it was just through organic friendship and growth and
A
kind of,
natural progression.
yeah, really. And it was never anything forced. And I'm so glad I can say that. It wasn't like we were trying something here. It was just kind of like, this is where it grew to, you know?
Hmm. Do you think that being Indigenous informs your art at all?
Yeah. If you'd asked me this a couple years ago, I would have said no. Again, because like when you look at my life, I'm a city guy, not a lot of culture, not a lot of traditions. Like the traditions, I've had to discover what Cree and Métis traditions are, and even then, I'm not even sure where some of the traditions I've gotten, you know. But I feel like for me, it is a level playing field for me now of being like Don Amero the artist guy and Don Amero the Indigenous guy, and I feel like those two are parts that I've actively see as being part of that amplifying, you know, and making sure that I can, if I'm going to do this, I want to do this again, bringing more things to light, bringing more opportunities to educate people on some of the things that I know, and which is not a lot, but you know, for what I do know about loving and caring for one another and trying our very best to create space to have these conversations and unity, I can speak to that because that's really what is on my heart. And so all that's a part of it. And I think, you know, when you look at the seven sacred teachings too, that's all I think innately in me. I never sort of gone out to kind of teach these things, but it's just sort of like part of my being, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. In addition to working full time as a musician, you're a husband and you have three gorgeous little ones, Oscar, Stella, and Elliot. What is it like? I feel like I get asked this question a lot as a mom, and I feel like it's something that doesn't get asked of dads too often. But what's it like balancing fatherhood and being a husband with your hectic work and tour schedule?
Mm. Well, the pandemic has afforded me lots of quantity time at home with them. They're actually out at the cabin right now, so I ran away back to the city to do some interviews and stuff today. Um, it is
I might steal that one, by the way, quantity
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I might
yeah.
steal that.
I love some good quality time. I could use less quantity, that's for sure. Uh, it's they're my greatest joy, you know. They are all the cliche things I that could be said, I want to say. Um, here's the other thing about parenthood that I don't think they can't tell you enough of is that they will cause you the greatest, beautifulest, most pleasant things in your whole life you ever thought. But you will never be as angry and
Yeah,
frustrated and mad at another human being as you will with these little creatures who just don't listen.
yeah, yeah, a
Like,
100%.
like I've had people come at me and yell at me in my face, and I'm not even that same anger as when my kid won't brush his teeth. You know, it's
Yeah,
like, come
yeah.
on, man, keeps in perspective, and it's so hard when you're in the middle of that fight. But yeah, they're my greatest teachers too. That man, they teach me so much about myself and all the things that I thought I had figured out. I'm realizing I do not.
Yeah. One of the things I always say is that if you can't win the small fights with your kids, you're not going to win the big ones. One of the questions I had for you, Don, is, you know, when we're talking about the remains of the 215 kids and the history of residential schools in Canada, you made a post, I think it was last week on Instagram about leaving shoes on your front steps
Hmm.
with your kids. And I know that you were talking about, you know, having a conversation with your kids at the dinner table. I know I've had those conversations in my house, but can you talk a little bit about what that entails and how do you and your wife Pam approach that?
Yeah, we just, you know, with them, we probably don't give them all the brutal stuff, you know,
Mm,
but we kind of tell it like the way that it is, you know, because we want them to understand. Like, in order for the things to change, it's education, and education means telling the truth of what we know. And I
mm-hmm,
feel like if my kids are going to be part of that next generation of hopefully continuing to do the work that's being done now, they need to know, you know. And so I think it was literally like, you know, they, in BC, they found these kids, and you know, because they hear Pam and I talking about it, and then we say, oh, well, here's what happened, and then we kind of tell
mm-hmm,
them the story, And if they ask questions, we try our best to answer them. Like I don't
Yeah.
think they asked who. I don't think they asked. But even then, we'll let them know, the idea of that it was the church organization, right? Like
Yeah.
the people at that time, that were causing these things to happen.
Because
Um,
Oscar is 9.
he's 9, yeah, but
9, yeah.
Stella's right there with him. Like she's kind of 9 too, like she's
Is she
not.
7?
She's 5. She'll be
She's
6
5.
next.
Okay.
Yeah. But and I just feel like she's kept up,
Mhm.
and we don't want to overwhelm them, but I also think there's this fine line between telling your kids not enough and telling your kids too much, right? So we feel
Yeah.
like we're in that good place of like just responding to kind of where they're at the time, and we also just don't want to be late to the game either, right? When you want to have the sex talk too and those kinds of things, right? Like it's important to make sure that you have you have your own stuff in order so that you
Right.
can, and it's okay to say, like, I feel like it's okay to be, oh, that's a good question, let me look that up a little bit and do my own research, and we're going to come back to this. And the
Hmm.
key is coming back to it, right? Just making sure that you make that effort, because that's, if the kids are asking questions, it's important to have answers for them, and really just creating space for that, right? Because if they're
Yeah.
going to grow and be able to make healthy decisions, then you need to give them the best answers you can that will help them do that.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when my daughter first learned about residential schools, she was in about grade 1,
Mm,
Grace, and she's the same age as Oscar. And she came home and she knew already at that point, obviously, that she's Anishinaabe and she's Cree. And so she came home and she said, this is what happened to Anishinaabe kids and Cree kids. And she said, am I going to get taken away?
oh
And,
boy.
and you think of like being an Indigenous parent, that isn't a question I would think that a non-Indigenous kid would ask. And so
Yeah.
but their questions are so honest, and so for us, we've done it from a place of like reassuring that this is yesteryear, this isn't happening, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But same like you and Pam, just talking about being honest with them. And I think the fact that their generation already knows is like miles ahead of,
Yeah.
so that hopefully their generation is the one they're gonna be the real change makers. But
And that's a good point, because the education system, I believe, was not, either not equipped with the proper information or just wasn't sharing this information when we were kids. It's a testament maybe to show that there is, the education system, I think, is building so that they don't let the same mistakes happen. And I'm really hoping it's not perfect.
yeah.
I don't rely on the education system to teach my kids everything.
Yeah.
I think if my kids can come out of school with math and a little bit of history and a little bit of science and understanding how their body works,
Yeah.
then I think that's good. I don't put all that pressure on school to sort of teach my kids everything. I think that's the parents' role as well. And I say that as a guy who feels like, my mom, their mom is with them, right, all day, so they get to be with mom. And I'm in a career that affords me a lot of time. So I'm saying that as I also want to temper that with, I know some people have, two income homes, where both parents are off to work. You and Wade are, right? Like you guys
Yeah.
are full-time workers. So it's easier for me to say I'll educate my kids for a good portion of that too. But I do believe that there's a big parent's responsibility in a lot of that education as well.
I agree. Don, you can't always be 21.
Nope.
Tell me about that song. Like, that song is incredible.
Oh, thanks, Des. So I don't know. A couple of months ago, we were kind of on the hunt for a new song. I write songs. I still write a lot. I tend to write, you probably know this, more melancholic, make you want to cry, make you sad kind of songs. I try to. People have called me like the country crooner. So I tend to write these, like, make you really kind of contemplate your whole life. And so we also know that there's some also really great songs out there that are already in existence that need a home, and I get to be that vessel sometimes that shares these songs. And so now this song, "You Can't Always Be 21," fell on our laps. So it was, my manager, Mike Denny. He reached out to Gordie Sampson, who we all know and love as the writer of one of the writers of "Jesus Take the Wheel." and Carrie Underwood's song, and so many other great songs. And Mike said, "Hey, I'm looking for a song for my artist Don Amero." Gordy Sampson goes, "Don Amero, I love that guy. I've been watching him for a couple years." And I was like, "Gordy Sampson knows who I am." So so he sent us a batch of songs, and Mike's diving in right away, and he says, "Don, stop whatever you're doing, go listen to this song right now." And it was "You Can't Always Be 21," written by Gordy Sampson, Simon Wilcox, Tog Salter, three Canadian writers, and Charles Kelly from Lady A. And so I was like, Mike, this is the song, because it wasn't just a, yeah, it wasn't just like a typical country song. It was like how I like to think, like it's a deep thinking song almost, right? It really makes you think about your life, and so I wrote all the writers, and I thought, I'll write Charles Kelly too. Like he's a Lady A guy. He's got no time to write me back. He's the only one who wrote me back. And
No
so,
way.
so he
That's
and I
awesome.
we chatted a little bit on Instagram there, and he even sent me some other songs, and I don't know if we're BFFs, but
Pretty
it was
close.
cool to kind of, yeah, but
Pretty close.
it's cool to have a personal connection to him, and I've always been a big Lady A fan, probably one of my favorite country bands out there, and yeah, so this song really meant a lot to me because I just turned 40. I turned 40 this year, if you can't tell. And it just felt like the song to me is about the second coming of age. Like there's 21, and then there's like the season of your life where you got to get it together. And
And the
so,
video is beautiful. Like
uh,
at the end when your little ones hop into your arms, it's like, oh.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I wish I could say I was the brains behind it all, but I was not. My buddy Landon, he's a great
I
film
was gonna
guy.
ask you, did Landon get the credit for
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
That was
for
great.
sure. And so I'm lucky enough to have a guy like him who has these great ideas, and we actually had planned to shoot it another way, but because of A, Winnipeg winters, and B, COVID, we were like, how do we do this in a way that we can make it work? And for me too, like when I saw the video, I got emotional watching me go and my kids running to my arms. I was like, it was so good, it's so perfect, and yeah, I just love Landon and his way of kind of making the story work with his lens.
That's awesome. Well, Don, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm really thankful for you taking the time to join us and to have this conversation today in honor and celebration of National Indigenous History Month. I see the work that you're doing. I'm proud to call you my friend. Keep blazing the trail and paving the way, and thank you for all that you do.
You're awesome, Des. Thanks so much for having me.